Good morning to all and welcome to Byju's. This is Basavaraj and we'll continue from where we have left. And this is an ecology and environment session. So hope I am audible as well as visible to you all, right? Done. Done. So 2 days classes were done where we discussed a concept of ecology and I gave some idea about the how the ecosystems perform. And while defining that in the Friday's class, we discussed something called as ecological footprint and biocapacity, right? So ecological footprint means it is about the land, productive land, which is needed for producing the resources. Resources means it can be food, it can be settlements, it can be educational institutions, it can be settlements. So it is the land which is required for developing the resources, producing the resources, and we consume the resource. After that, we consume the resource. And once we consume the resource, then we generate the wastes like solid waste, greenhouse gases. Many wastes are generated. And these wastes have to be assimilated, have to be absorbed in the land. So this entire land which is required for development of the resources, after consuming these resources, waste which is generated, again that waste has to be assimilated, absorbed. So this land which demand is done by humans is referred as ecological footprint. This is what I told Friday. And the supply which is done by the earth, we refer that as biocapacity. So we peak demand on Mother Earth. And the supply is done by earth. So ecological footprint and biocapacity is two entities. One is demand side and one is supply side. And this ecological footprint and biocapacities both are calculated in the unit called as global hectares. Global hectares. And every year we have to calculate that because we have to see as an economist or as an ecologist, when we do, we always see what is the demand side and what is the supply side, whether demand is more or whether supply is more, or whether both are at the same platform. So hence every year, the demand side and supply side is calculated. The demand side is ecological footprint and the supply side is the biocapacity of the earth. Every year it is done, and every year the renewable aspect is seen. Every year the earth renews its resources and we consume that resources. And this calculation is done by global footprint network. Every year it is calculated by global footprint network. It calculates that what amount of land is required, because every time it changes. Every year there will be variations. Why? Because change in the population structure, change in the need, change in the demands, change in the demand. So every year there will be a fluctuation in the ecological footprint. Every year there will be change. So hence you have to calculate yearly basis that what amount of demands are there, and at the same time what amount of the supply is done by the earth. So every year we calculate. So understand that whether it is balanced done or whether the biocapacity is degrading. So some 500 years back, when the population was less, when our demands were not more, when there was no demand for large amount of the luxuries at that time, so in that case, the ecological footprint was less and biocapacity was very high. So what the humans required for 365 was easily sufficed by the earth, and extra was there with the earth. It is just like 500 bottles of water are required and the factory is producing 1000 bottles. So demand is lesser than what they can supply. So there will be surplus left with the factories. So that was some 500 years back. The same thing, footprints were smaller and biocapacity was very large some 500 years back. So earth could have easily supplied what the human needs were there. And that is where at that time the water which was flowing in the river was very clean, the air what they breathed was very clean, the land was very fertile. Why? Because ecosystem was in healthy states, the agriculture land was fertile, the rivers were fresh. Why? Because earth had more resources than what the demands were there. So that was some 500 years back. Now, after some times, when we reached to the stage when the population increased, demands increased, population increased, demands increased, needs increased, and then we found that at one stage we reached to the stage when the ecological footprint was same as biocapacity. That is, the needs are also same, and the earth which can supply is also the same. That is, 1,000 bottles requirements were there, and the 1,000 bottles the factory is producing. So it is completing the demand, it is providing the demand which is made by that. So balancing was done with some stress. But if you say the present condition, there is a demand for 1,500 bottles, and the factory is producing 100 bottles, 1,000 bottles only. So there is a huge demand, and it becomes very difficult for the factory to supply that. Right. So what it will do? What it will do? So after that 1,000 bottles which it will supply, so maybe it will supply in a small period of a time. After that, when there is a demand for extra, then factory will do overtime working, and that overtime working will make stress to the people who are there, burden to the people who are there. Now the same thing in the earth, as the population has increased, as the demands have increased, as the needs have increased, so ecological footprint is becoming bigger and bigger, the demand is becoming bigger and bigger. And in this case, the earth which can supply the resources for 365 days is unable to supply that. So it is supplying that for a small period of a time, maybe for 5 months, 6 months, 4 months, etc. Right? So it is unable to supply the resources, renew and supply the resources throughout the year naturally. So here we use a concept called as overshoot day. Overshoot means something which is beyond its natural supply. So at present, when we say you take the data of 2023, so in the year 2023, the demand was for 365 days, 365 days, but the earth could have supplied the resources only up to 2nd August. And after the 2nd August, everything what we took from the earth, that is over exploitation, was done. After the 2nd August, over exploitation was done. Over exploitation was there. We used more chemical fertilizers to extract more crops. Overfishing activities, which reduces the number of fish. More cutting up of trees, which made deforestation. So we refer this as over exploitation of resources. And because of over exploitation of resources, many problems will start. Like when we use more chemical fertilizers to the land will lose its fertility. We refer that as ecosystem degraded. When we make more catching up the fish species will reduce. It means their biodiversity will decrease, their ecosystem will decrease. If we cut the trees, then the forest will become degraded. So after this overshoot day, when the earth can supply the natural resources for the humanity, after that we always make over exploitation of resources. And over exploitation of resources is that this will make the ecosystem to degrade. This will make the ecosystem to degrade. Degrade means its carrying capacity decreases. Right? So this is what you have to understand. Degrading of ecosystem is done. Over exploitation which starts. Now, this is for 2023. If we take 2024, it has become more worst. In the year 2024, they have calculated that The earth which can supply the resources will be up to 25th July. And after 25th July, we will be doing over exploitation of resources. Over exploitation will start from that. And that is where the resources will still shrink. The land will become more degraded. The forest will become more less in the numbers. Right. So hence, now the duty is to make sure that we have to make the restoring of ecosystem. We have to protect the ecosystem. We have to conserve the ecosystem. Unless and until we conserve the ecosystem, it will be having a major problem on the humanity for their survival. If all the soils become infertile, then from where we will get food? If all the forests become degraded, from where we will get oxygen? If all the fish resources are end, then from where we will get the food supplies? So this is where we have to make sure that we have to restore the ecosystem. It is something like we are cutting the branch on which we are staying. We are staying on a tree in a branch, and we are cutting the same branch on which we are sitting. That is where we have to understand that the ecological footprints has to be reduced and the biocapacity has to be increased. Now, how the ecosystem footprint can be reduced? It can be done by many ways: restoring the ecosystems, solid waste managements, clean energies, so that reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, right? Proper planning of the resources, decreasing the usages, renewable, or what we say when we talk about water, reuse that water for 2 or 3 times. Sometimes when we say the same water can be used for different activities, water treatment can be done, pollution control can be done, population has to be decreased. So by doing these things like restricting or reducing the population, solid waste management, planting more trees, reducing the fossil fuel usages, using clean energies, reusing the natural resources like water, organic farming, or taking care of the resources which are available. So by this we can reduce the ecological footprint and increase the biocapacities. Is it clear? So hence we should remember that we should take care of the ecological footprint into very smaller and increase the bio capacities. Now, in context of India also, the ecological footprint, when we want to reduce, we have to make sure that the population should be reduced, solid waste management should be done, greenhouse gas emission should be reduced, right? And more land should be kept fertile so that it can provide food resources for the humanity. Is it clear? So remember this. Now, when we talk about the resources, it talks about both, yeah, natural as well as anthropogenic. Anthropogenic means sometimes man-made. They should be seized. When we talk about that man-made resources, we have something called as earthquake-resistant buildings are there. We are having some buildings where the natural energies are used, like light energy, solar energies are used. So by that we can reduce the impact of human footprint on the resources what we are there. So it is both natural as well as the anthropogenic one. So that's why if you see in Bangalore, we find large solid waste is thrown on the roads. Why? Because we are not managing that. Why? Because there is no land where we can dump them. So we need to understand that, right? How to make segregation of solid waste and then settle the issues. So all this we will read when I take the pollution perspective. Is it clear? So this is what you should understand about the ecological footprint and biocapacities. And always remember, we have to reduce the ecological footprint. Then only we can survive in the present scenarios. Now, if we take the present condition, if we take the present conditions, since from 1971, where they made an effort in calculating that. So at that time, it was up to 30 November. But if you take 2014, it was 2nd August. If you take the 2023 up to 2 August or 2nd August, the earth could have supplied the resources. After that, we are always making over exploitation of resources, right? So the bottom line is we have to make sure the ecological footprints are reduced by proper planning, management, and making sure that all the ecosystems like agricultural fields, forests, lakes, they all are maintained in healthy states. Is it clear? Green buildings, yes, they are the same. Population has to be reduced means per person, yes, population means the global population is increasing. As the population increasing, it will always have more demand. Demand for 10 people is more than demand for 5 people, even though they are having the same demand, but the volume is more, right? So that population can be reduced. So hence population policies have been introduced to reduce the populations wherever they are very high. In some areas the populations are less, like in countries of Japan we find populations are less, but the demands are more. In that case, demands for other sectors are more, right? So it depends on per capita demands and population needs. Also in India, the demands of the people are less, but the volume is very high. Volume is very high. In some countries population is very less, but the demands are very high. The demands are very high. Standard of living is very high. But in context of India, the population is more, but the demands are less. So even though the demands are less, the volume of population is very, very more compared to its resources which can be generated. Is it clear? So hence we should remember these things. So when we talk about that, only way where we can reduce is to make efficient use of the ecosystems, right? Okay, all we can do, fertility rates and all, so population policies and all, they are there. So this is where a concept has to be kept in the mind, that we have to work on all the sectors vertically: population, solid waste management, clean energies, right? And then land managements, organic farming, natural farmings, right? So all those methodologies we have to use. That awareness has to be created. Restoring of the wetlands, make the ponds and lakes to survive. Sewage treatment plants has to be done. Open defecation has to be reduced. So all these things has to be done. So hence environment has taken a strong stage, because without the ecosystem we can't survive. Without the ecosystem we can't survive. And there is a threat for ecosystems, because all the ecosystems are always under dynamic equilibrium, and if you don't restore them properly, then ecosystem will collapse. That's what we studied in homeostasis. So none of the ecosystem is permanent. They all are under dynamic equilibrium. You have to take care of them. You have to make sure that they are in the healthier and good condition. If you don't take care of the resources, if you don't protect, don't conserve the ecosystem, then the entire thing will collapse, or it will change into something. Is it clear? Now we'll try to understand furthermore on this. As I told, that the ecosystems are always, see how they are calculating, it's not much important. So they calculate on the basis of uh, capacity, so that is biocapacity divided by ecological footprint into 365. So that is not much important. Ecological footprint, when we say, it is biocapacity divided by ecological footprint into 365 days, right? So that is how they calculate. They will never ask you in detail about that. They will ask what is ecological footprint, what is biocapacity, and how they are related with the present conditions. UPSC will ask questions based on these things only. If you understand the concept, you don't have to by heart anything. You should keep that in the mind. So that's why every world, or every nations of the world, they are working towards clean energies, reducing population strategies, so that we can restore the ecosystems, right? Now now when we talk about the ecosystems, all the ecosystems are under stress. All the ecosystems are degraded. Always remember, a healthier ecosystem, a healthier ecosystem, and any ecosystem which is richer in biodiversity, any ecosystem which is richer in biodiversity, any ecosystem which is richer in biodiversity, healthier ecosystem and richer in biodiversity, will always provide the services, best services or the benefits. And I explained what are the ecosystem services. Like, take an example of agricultural land. It provides food. Forests provide timber, oxygen, etc. So these are referred as services. Absorbing of carbon dioxide, clean energies, purification of water. So all these are referred as services which are provided by the ecosystems. So if any ecosystem is healthier and if it is having abundant species there, that is biodiversities, those ecosystems will provide more benefits, more services to the humanity. Now, if you see the present condition of 2024, we find that almost all the ecosystems are degraded. The ecosystems are degraded, or most of the ecosystems are degraded, and some have already been destroyed. Some are destroyed. So hence it has become very important that if you don't restore them, then it becomes a major problem. So that's why United Nations, that's why when we talk about the United Nations has made its effort. United Nations Apologies for a minute. I'll just check. Wait a minute.
यहाँ से कैमरा ऑफ होगा।
अच्छा, यहाँ पे क्लिक देखो, वही मैं दबा रहा था ना, नहीं आ रहा है। हाँ, अब आ गया। ठीक है,
सेलेक्ट कर लीजिएगा।
क्यों ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है? ये
ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, ठीक है। वो थोड़ा सा इसका जो है ना, ये
नो,
देखिए, ये थोड़ा सा वो
ठीक
घिस गया है।
ठीक है।
इसको अकॉर्डिंग,
हाँ,
ठीक है।
डन।
बाकी कभी भी
Done. Okay, apologies for the short break. Done. So here I told that all the ecosystems are either degraded or they have been destroyed. Why? Because of overconsumption. So hence United Nations has decided that we have to restore the ecosystem. We have to restore the ecosystem, or we should make sure that the recovery of ecosystem has to be done. And that's why in collaboration with the two organizations, that is United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, plus Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO. I'm repeating, United Nations Environment Program. I'll take this in detail when I take global warming and climate change. So, United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and FNO, Food and Agriculture Organizations, both have collaborated to implement this program of United Nations called as Ecosystem Restoration Decade. Ecosystem Restoration Decade. Now, the idea of ecosystem restoration decade is to create awareness among the people, to create awareness among the people about the ecosystem, and also to conserve the ecosystems, restore the ecosystems, protect the ecosystem, etc. So that we can need the benefits to be run in proper way. So it is something like when we talk about the maintaining the healthier standards of ecosystem. So generally we say it talks on preventing, healing, and reversing the damages. Healing and reversing the damages. Reversing damages. Right. So it is something where we have to bring the ecosystem from exploitating to the state of healing. So bring the ecosystem from exploitating state to healing state. Healing state. Like degraded agriculture land should be brought into a good state. So it is from exploitating state to healing state. To healing state. Is it clear? So it talks about the global platform, national platform, regional platform, where they make all these arrangements to restore the ecosystems by many plannings, policies, etc. Right, and applying the knowledge in our education system and etc. so that we can restore the ecosystems. Because if we don't restore, then there is a problem that we can't stay on the earth with what we are staying in this condition. Is it clear? So this is something about the ecosystem restoration and its importance. Because if we don't restore the ecosystem, then the ecological footprints will increase so high that earth will not be sufficient for us. So we will be needing two earths land for our need, right? So from where we will get one more earth? Already we have making more utilization of resources or exploitation of resources. If the demands continues, so maybe in another 10 years we will be needing two earth space to need or to suffices our needs here, right? So it's better to reduce the ecological footprint and make methodology to increase the biocapacities, right? Okay. Now, questions were asked in UPSC, like in the context of ecosystem productivity, marine upwelling zones are important as they increase the marine productivity. Upwelling means when the water moves up in the ocean. So generally we have upwelling and downwellings are there. Whenever upwelling is there, upwelling will be of cold water. cold water, like Peru current. If you remember, Peru current is an upwelling one. Now the Peru current, when it does upwelling, it brings the nutrients to the surfaces. It brings the nutrients to the surfaces. Nutrients to the surfaces. And as the nutrients accumulates in the surface, then fish will reach there to eat them. More fish will reach there to eat them, right? And here the question is, ecosystem productivity. Marine upwelling zones are important as they increase the marine productivity. Now the question is about marine productivity. How the marine productivity increases? When the large amount of fish are there and the fish catch becomes easy, right? To bringing that decomposing microorganisms to the surfaces, nutrients to the surfaces, bottom dwelling organism to the surfaces. Now here you should remember, decomposer microorganisms are not significant, because if the microorganisms are there, they will decompose everything. So it is about the nutrients which reach to the surfaces. The nutrients which reach to the surfaces, and these nutrients become the bait for the fish which catches. So hence, when we see Peru, the country Peru, it depends on fishing activities. Its productivity is mainly on fishing activities. Why? Because of upwelling of Peru current, right? Now, if you are reading the current affairs, the moment when there is a condition called as El Nino, so during El Nino, we find the conditions become reverse. Upwelling stops and the Peru fishing activity is stopped here, right? So hence, upwelling regions are the areas where we find nutrients reach to the surfaces, right? So nutrients to the surfaces. It's not bottom dwelling organism to the surfaces. It is nutrients. Dead plants and animals are brought to the surfaces. Dead plants to the surfaces. Okay. Then which one of the following terms describes the not only the physical space occupied by an organism, but also its functional role in the ecosystem? It's a very simple example. It is physical space as well as its activities. We refer that as ecological niche. Ecological niche. Perfect. Then consider the following: bats, rares, rodents. The phenomenon of hibernation can be observed in which of the following? So hibernation is observed in species, more specifically when we say not only in the mammals, but few other species can also do that. Along with the mammals, we may find some species of the birds can also does that. But here the options are given for bats, bears, and rodents. And if you see them, all the three are there in the list. All the three are there. Right. Now, why is there great concern about the microbeads that were released in the environment? So microbeads are the small nanoparticles of plastics which were used in cosmetics. They were used in the cosmetics. Right. So this was used by the people for beauty products and all. So this microbeads, they entered into the aquatic ecosystems, and this microbead, as it is a plastic, it is very difficult to be decomposed. It can be degraded, but it can't be decomposed. So when it becomes smaller in the particles, when it is still degraded, fish eat them. Fish and marine organisms, when they eat them, so marine organisms, when they eat, they can't digest the plastics. When they can't digest the plastics, then they will die because of hunger as it accumulates in their stomach. So hence it is considered as harmful for the marine ecosystems. Current affair based questions, right? So every time we find such types of concepts are asked in the examinations. It is a plastics, microplastics. And fish and other marine organisms, they eat, but they can't digest that. So because of the shortage of because of the hunger perspectives, they die because they can't take extra food. They can't eat extra food. Why? Because their stomach is filled with this plastic. Their stomach is filled with the plastics, so they can't take extra food. Is it clear? So here, when we say hibernations, rodents can go that, but they also undergoes hibernation. They also goes hibernation, right? They also go hibernation. Okay. Which of the following is the best description of the term ecosystem? So definition of ecosystem. The moment when we say definition of ecosystem, you have to remember that biotic and abiotic components in their physical environment, right? So here, when we talk about that, the community of organisms together with their environment in which they live. So a community of organism interacting with one another is called as ecology. Ecology, that interaction is ecology. But when we say the ecosystem, it is the community of organisms together with the environment in which they live is referred as ecosystem. Then in the grassland, trees do not replace the grassland of an ecological succession, because the moment when we talk about grassland, in the grassland there will always be shortage of water. There will always be shortage of water. Third type of question. So when we talk about third type of question, so that's what, there are many questions are there, Kishan, where it is very difficult to answer them. So we say that some difficult questions are there. So that's why it's not about answering all 100 questions. It's not about answering 100 questions. So some factual questions becomes very, very difficult. So I'm not telling that you have to answer all, but sometimes when you are reading in the current affairs, you may get the clues and you may get an idea. So when you make a proper revision, you may get those. So your idea should be that at least around 80 answers, 80 questions you have to attempt. In that, 70 should be at least correct there. So this is where we say many facts are there from ecology and environment. So factual based questions will be there. So that's where you have to read your class 12th NCERT books, that is last 4 chapters, and class 11th, the starting 4 chapters, which will give you the factual data. Right. So biobreeds, microbreeds, accumulation, and bioremediation. So here we are not talking about the concepts. We are talking about the issues associated with the microorganisms and consumption of that. So in the grasslands, we always find there will be a shortage of water, and grasslands are always associated with forest fires. Forest fires. We will see them in biodiversities. So hence, in the grasslands, they cannot be replaced by the trees. Why? Because there will be a shortage of water and fire. So there will be shortage of water, and grasslands are always associated with forest fires. And it's very difficult for trees to resist the forest fires there. So hence, it is very difficult to replace. So this is a part of ecological succession. Ecological succession. So these are the questions. Try to write answers for them, so that once you write answers, then it becomes something where the concepts will print in your mind. Concepts will print your mind, right? Services provided, carrying capacities, ecological footprint, how to reduce the ecological footprint of India, what is ecological succession. Try to write answers of this. So around 150 to 200 words. And wherever possible, put diagrams. Put diagrams. So another 2 or 3 classes, then we will take mains questions also, because there should be a good content in your mind. Then we can take up few mains questions also. Another 2 or 3 sessions, then we will take up few mains questions and answer writing on that part, right? Now we'll move on to biodiversity. Biodiversity means it is biological diversity. Biological diversity. Biodiversity or biological diversity. Now, the moment when we say biological diversity, So this biological diversity is a work of millions of years of evolution. This biological diversity is the work of millions of years of evolution. It is not that the today's work. Species have changed in their characteristics and they evolved over a period of a time. So this species which have been changed in their characteristics makes different norms, and this diversities which we refer that as biological diversity or biodiversity. So it is the work of millions of years of evolution which involves many process are there. But how we see this biodiversities, in a very simple term, if you take cats, so many breeds of cats will be there, right? And this is called as species. Many breeds of cats will be there. So we find variety of cats are there. And if we take another area where we are having cats, we are having dogs, we are having elephants, etc. So we find variation of the species are there. Right. So variety in the same species, variation of the species. When we combine that, we get what is called as biodiversity. In simple, we say biodiversity is variety of the species, same species, and variation or variability among all the groups. Understand? Variety in the same species, different breeds of dogs, different breeds of cats, we refer them as variety in the same species, and variations in the species. So when we add more species, then we refer that as community. Rearrange the words. So this is called as community. So in community, we find different species are there. Right. And in variety, different breeds will be there. In the same species. Right. So another name for the species is population. So sometimes we define them as population. So when I discussed the hierarchy, this is what I told. Yes, it is a next chapter. That is biodiversity, Stephen. Yes. Biodiversity. Yes, we completed the first chapter called as concept of ecology. Then we are moved to this biodiversity. I hope it is the continuation with that. Right. Now, variety in the same species, and variations, which we refer them as communities. Now, when we see these animals, take an example of the reptiles like snakes or rats. So they have their own habitation in the deserts. If you take marine organisms like fish and all, so they will have their own habitations in the oceans. If you take grasslands will have their own type of animal species. Then we have flora species. So they are having their own types of habitats. They will be having their own types of habitats. So this type of variability in the same species, among the community, and also their habitats, that is ecosystem complexes, we refer this as biodiversity. Is it clear? See, understand, variety means breeds. See, it is simple to remember. So when we are talking about, say, dosa, so you will never say we want variations of dosa. We say varieties of dosas are there. Paneer dosa, egg dosas, right? So it means same dosa has different names. We refer them as varieties. Varieties. So from dosa, if you move on to say something like pulao, then we say variations. Variations. Pulao, fruit salads, we refer them as variations. Is it clear? Variety in the same, variations in the community. Is it clear? Okay, done. Right. So variety and variability. So remember, variety within the species, variability among the species and their habitats. And their habitats. So when we take all these, we refer that as biodiversities, because their dwelling places are also different. Their habitats are also different. Habitats are also different. Is it clear? Okay. Now, when we talk about the biodiversities, the life, biodiversity means the life. And this includes plants and animals, both. Animals, both, including bacteria. So when you are reading your knowledge-based books, we come across the first species which started life on the earth is the bacteria. Bacterias, right? So these bacterias, more specifically, we come across cyanobacterias. More specifically, we come across cyanobacterias, which were the first species on the earth which provided some nutrients, which provided some activities. Now take an example of cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is an bacteria which started the work of photosynthesis, and it added oxygen to the, what we say, atmosphere. Cyanobacteria. Now even today we find the fossils of cyanobacteria are there. Even today we find the fossils of cyanobacteria are there, and these fossils we refer them as stromatolites. Stromatolites. Fossils of fossils of the bacteria are stromatolites. Is it clear? Now, this was some billions years or millions years. So then we reached to a stage. Somewhere around 540 million years ago. 540 million years ago. Now, this 540 million years ago, around 540, not exactly 540, maybe 550, 560, 540. So around 540 million years ago. Around 540 million years ago. Now, during this phase, due to the earth movements, we always know something called as tectonics. So due to the tectonic movements, there may be possibility that abundant oxygen was there, maybe due to tectonic activity, or maybe due to some events which were there. So large amount of oxygen might have increased in the earth's atmosphere, and another components might have been increased. And these were responsible. So the change in the atmosphere was responsible somewhere in 540 millions, that prokaryotes becomes eukaryotes. Prokaryotes, that is not proper nucleus. Eukaryotes, very well defined nucleus. So prokaryotes become eukaryotes, and in this phase of 540 to 520 or 530 million years, we find all the animal species evolved. All animal species evolved. And that too in a very short period of a time. That is around 10 to 15 million years. Short time of 10 to 15 million years. Now here, short means compared to age of an earth. If you see the age of an earth is 4.5 billion years. So in that million year is very small. So here we use comparatively. It's not compared to the human age, it is compared to the age of Earth. So million years are shorter, smaller pan only, right? So age of an Earth is billions, and millions are shorter. So in this phase, around 10 to 15 million years, all the animal species get evolved, exploded during the phase called as Cambrian period. During the Cambrian period, so this animal species which evolved in a very shorter period of a time during that Cambrian period, during that Cambrian period, we refer that as Cambrian explosion. We refer that as Cambrian explosion. See, stromatolites are the fossils of cyanobacteria. Fossils of cyanobacteria. We find them as stromatolites, and we can find them even in Madhya Pradesh, Australia, many parts of the world we can find. So stromatolites are fossils of cyanobacteria, the first organisms which were there. After that, slowly the evolution took place, and then this phase, 540 million years, is a phase where we find all the animal species evolved. That is, we find echinoderms, chordates, mollusks, all arthropods, cnidarians, and all they evolved in a very short period of a time, that is 10 to 15 million years during that Cambrian period. And we refer that as a Cambrian explosion. We refer that as Cambrian explosion. Is it clear? So here, when we say cyanobacteria, it is something where it was immersed in the water. Even today in the oceans we find cyanobacteria. I'm talking about cyanobacteria, I'm not talking about in detail about their evolution, so don't get much into that. Cyanobacteria, even today we find them in the oceans, right? So it refers to the sudden appearance in the animal complex, animal species. And this is where we find all the animal species have been evolved somewhere around 545 million years. Almost all the animal phyla have been evolved in that phase. We refer that as Cambrian explosion. Cambrian explosion. Sometimes when they ask in the prelims, we should remember that. Cambrian explosion, right? Now, when we talk about the patterns of biodiversities, so this you should remember. The pattern of biodiversity is not uniform. So it depends on the availability of resources and tolerance. It depends on availability of resources, and response of organisms. Response of organisms. Response of organisms to their environment. To their environment. How they respond to the environment, and also adaptability, adaptation, and adaptability. Adaptability, right? Now, based on the resources which are there, response of organism to the environment and their adaptability, we find the biodiversity is not uniform. If you take the earth, right? So in the earth we are having equator where 0 degrees are there, and if you take the poles, they are 90 degrees. And this is the tropics, Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So here we find the resources are abundant. So we always find large biodiversities are at equator. So this is where we find high biodiversities. So high biodiversities at tropical area. High biodiversity at equator, or we say tropical area. Why? Because their resources are more, and environment adaptability is easy. And response is also ideal. So hence we find large species and large varieties are there. Hundreds of frog varieties, dogs, cats, trees, etc. So it is maximum at equator. So it is maximum at equator. And when you move down towards the poles, then the temperature decreases. Conditions are not favorable for organisms to adapt. So not all organisms will adapt. Those organisms which will adapt, they will survive. And hence, when we move on towards the poles, the biodiversity decreases. So that's why if you see the species at the Western Ghats, 400 varieties of frogs are there. But when you move on to the Arctic and Antarctic, you don't find even a single frog. Why? Because they can't adapt to that. They can't adapt to that. But in the Western Ghats, every month you will find new varieties of frogs are there. New varieties of tree has been identified. New varieties of the flower has been identified, because this is very rich in diversities due to easy adaptability and easy resources which are available. So hence the biodiversity is maximum at the equator and it decreases towards the poles. It decreases towards poles, right? So higher latitudes it decreases. Equator and all are lower latitudes. So these are called as lower latitudes. And poles, and these we refer them as higher latitudes. Right? So remember this. So when we talk about the ocean acids, that we will see later, right? So these are called as the lower latitudes. Yes, homogeneity we can say at higher latitude, because there we talk about same varieties we can find in a very limited number. So this is a general perspective where we say biodiversity is generally maximum at the lower latitudes or equator and decreases when you move on towards the poles. So 400 varieties of the frogs, and when you move on to that poles, it may be only one homogeneity will be there, only one type will be there, no biodiversities will be there, right? Perfect. Now, when we talk about, this is about latitudinal extent. Again, when you see the mountains, so at the foothills of the mountains, the ideal conditions are there, right? So when we move down, we have more opportunities. But when we move up, the temperature decreases, opportunities also decreases. And we refer that as altitude. Altitude means with the height. So that's why if you see the foothills of Himalayas, varieties of the animal species will be there. And when you move on to the height, we may find snow leopard or very small amount of the life is there. So with the altitude also it decreases. With altitude, the ecosystem biodiversity decreases. Right? Yes, we may find certain exceptions. So that's why we say in ecology or environment, there are general say, we can't say 100%. We may find some exceptions. So generally it is about the biodiversity which is maximum at the equator decreases towards the poles. And with the altitude, that is with the height, it always decreases. So here we find many varieties will be there because many opportunities will be in this areas. Right? So this is something which we talk about. Yes, Ocean, we will discuss that. Where I'll be having one session on somewhere the recent one, so we will discuss in that point. Small tidbits we can discuss that. Right. So this is a concept where we talk about pattern of biodiversity. Now, next is the levels of biodiversities. In the context of levels of biodiversities, we define the levels of biodiversities into three levels. One is genetic diversity, then species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Very simple. Genetic diversity means it is genetic variations within the species. Genetic variations within the species. Now, when we talk about this, remember, genes are blueprint of all organisms. And they always are seen as base pairings with their 4 bases and their combinations. And these 4 bases we refer them as adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine, ATCG. And this various combinations of this provides characteristics to the species. It provides characteristics to the species. Characteristic to the species. So genetic variations within the species, we refer them as the first stage called as genetic diversity. Now, why it is important and what is the significance of that? If any species make the changes, what will happen to that? If it make changes, then it makes the species to adapt to the changing environment. So genetic diversity will make the species to adapt to the changing environment. Right. So if take an example of species of rats are there, if they adapt by making change in the combination of their genes, then they can survive with the many diseases which are occurring there. Human beings also the same. When the change in the variations are there, when there is change in the combinations, then we can survive. So that's why when it is not happening, we are making an effort called as genetic modification, genetically modified crops, genetically modified animals. We refer them as transgenic animals. So just remember that when we say genetically modified, we are deliberately changing the genetic mode so that they can become drought resistant, flood resistant, temperature resistance. Then only they can survive. So when they make the variations, then only they can survive, right? So here genetic diversity means it is change in their genetic makeup, change in their genetic variations, and that will help the organisms to adapt to the changing environment. Just reconnect that. GM crops are when we are deliberately, it's not the natural, we are deliberately changing the makeup of certain crops like BT cotton, where they can survive in the conditions, where they adapt to the conditions, right? So genetic diversity is adapting, variations in the species, right? So please remember, blueprint of all organisms. Now these are your basic terms. And apart from that, when the organisms make variations and adapt, then it will prevent them from extinction. Adapt, and second is it will prevent them from extinction. It will prevent the species from extinction. Pesticides can develop, and see, when we say, I'm just giving an example, they can develop antibodies. I'm giving an example that how the genetic diversities are there. So it can be naturally, but sometimes human involved is there. We refer them as a GM. I'm giving an example to understand that what is this genetical modification and resistance part. I'm not talking in detail about that. I'm just giving an example, right? So genetic variations within the species, which make the species to adapt to the changing environment, and also it will prevent the species from extinction. More species, more varieties, then they can sustain in their conditions, right? Species diversity means when we find change in the communities. So it is measures the diversity within community, measures diversity within community. We refer that as species like dogs varieties, cats breeds, camels breeds, etc. We refer that as measures in the diversity within the community. Different varieties of cats, dogs, rats, lions, etc. We refer them as species diversity. Now here, these species diversities are measured by two indices. They are measured by two indices. No, you don't have to understand how they are there. You don't have to elaborate how they are there. Sometimes in prelims they may ask two indices to measure the species diversity is. One is called as the Simpson index, and second one is Shannon-Weiner index. Shannon-Weiner index. So both these indices, they measure the species biodiversity. They measure species biodiversity. Genes are blueprints of all organisms. Genes means when we talk about this ATCG, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. So genes are blueprint of all organisms. Please understand this. It is a very basics of class 10th. Okay. So here we talk about Simpson index and Shannon-Weiner index, which are used to measure the species diversity. Now, don't elaborate what is Simpson index and what is Shannon-Weiner. Just remember that. So they can be asked in the prelims. They can ask them in the prelims. Species diversity. Then ecosystem diversity. So in a space, in any area where we talk, any areas where we talk, we always find that their habitats will vary. Their residences will vary. So variations in their habitats. Variations in their habitats. Some species stay in the grasses. Some species stay in the aquatic, some species stay in the land area. So variations in the habitat, in the geographical area, variations in the habitat in any geographical area. We refer that as ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem diversity. Yes, species diversity are implication of abiotic factors. Perfect. They are implication because they adapt and they can survive, right? Now, when we talk about the levels of biodiversity, measures of biodiversity are also seen. So in this context, we always talk about three terms: alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity. Now, what are this alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity? Now, understand this. You are having an ecosystem. So this is an ecosystem 1. This is an ecosystem 2. And this is an ecosystem 3. Three ecosystems are there. Now, the species in the ecosystem. The species in the ecosystem. Here, they are having the species A, B, and C. So in the ecosystem 1, we are having the three species A, B, and C. Ecosystem 1 has species A, B, and C. And if you take the ecosystem 2, in the ecosystem 2, we are having the species called as B, C, D, and E. So ecosystem 2 has species B, C, D, and E. Right. Now, if you take the ecosystem 3, ecosystem 3 has the species E and F. So 3 has the species E and F. Right. So hence, alpha diversity of the ecosystem 1 is 3. So diversity within the particular area or ecosystem. So alpha diversity of ecosystem 1 is 3. Alpha diversity of ecosystem 2 is 4. Alpha diversity of ecosystem 3 is 2. Alpha diversity. Now, what is beta diversity? Beta diversity, when we calculate, it is if you are calculating beta diversity between ecosystem 1 and 2. 1 and 2. So here it is we have to take the total species of ecosystem 1 minus overlapping species of ecosystem 1 and 2 plus the total species of ecosystem 2 minus overlapping of ecosystem 1 and 2. 1 and 2. So this will give beta diversity, that is change in the species diversity between the ecosystem. Now if we take the ecosystem 1, so here the number of species are 3, A, B, C, 3 are there, right? And what are overlapping with the ecosystem B? B and C are overlapping here. So it is 3 minus 2, A, B, C, B, C, D. So B, C and B, C are overlapping. 3 minus 2 plus. If you take the ecosystem 2, so the number of species there are 4, and the overlapping species are 2, BC and BC. 4 minus 2. So it is 1 plus 2, which is referred as 3. So beta diversity between 1 and 2 ecosystem is 3. Is it clear? Now in the same way, please calculate the beta diversity between 1 and 3. Beta diversity between 1 and 3. Please calculate this. Try to find it this fast. Beta diversity between 1 and 3. So this is where I expected that you will always make a mistake. So it is not about adding 3 and 2. Adding 3 and 2 is not there. Sir, in this ecosystem 1, we are having 3 species. Are there any overlapping from ecosystem 3? No overlapping. ABC, do you find any ABC? Yes, Palak, perfect. It is 0. So 3 are there. So when you are finding here, 3 species are there. We don't have any overlapping. No overlapping species are there, right? Again, when you talk about this, 2 species are there. We don't have any overlapping are there, right? So hence, when we talk about this, 3 species are there. So minus overlapping is 0. Sorry, 0, right? Plus 2 species are there. Overlapping is 0. So 3 plus 2. Apologies for that. It is 5 only. Apologies for that. Because in ecosystem we find 3 species are there, and we don't find any overlapping. Apologies for that. And in ecosystem we are having 2 and no overlapping. So it is 5. Shubhangi, Dikshit, Nancy, all perfect. Apologies for that. Right. So this is what we refer them as the ecosystem beta biodiversities. I hope it is clear. So total species minus overlapping. Perfect. Right. Then when you take gamma diversity means all the species there, A, B, C, D, F. So gamma diversity will be having A, B, C, D, E, and F. So it will be 6. Gamma diversity will be 6. Is it clear? Gamma diversity means all the diversities in different ecosystems. So it will be A, B, C, D, E, F, which can be found in the ecosystems. Is it clear? So alpha diversities, beta diversities, and gamma diversities. Right. So when you are writing answers, remember that alpha within particular area, beta within the ecosystems, then gamma measures all the diversities in the different ecosystems. So these statements are important. They will not give you this data. So statements are important in the context of your examinations. All 5 answers are correct. Apologies for that 0 and 10 part. 5 is correct answer. Okay. So now mega biodiverse countries. So what are mega biodiverse countries? We have many countries in the world. More than 190 countries are there. But out of these countries, we have few countries where we find they are rich in biodiversity. very rich, in fact not rich, very rich in biodiversity. Plus these biodiversities are native to that area. These biodiversities are native to that area. Anything which is native, we refer them as endemic. Endemic, native to that area, that is endemic. Right. So those countries which are rich in biodiversities, and not only rich in biodiversities, they are endemic. So rich in biodiversity, rich in biodiversity, and rich in endemism. Endemism. So here, when we talk about biodiversity and endemism, it is about both flora and fauna. Both flora and fauna, that is plant and animal species. So such countries where they are rich in biodiversity and endemism, we refer them as mega biodiverse countries. But what criteria are done? So the criteria were given on the basis of certain perspectives. That's on the basis of certain perspectives, like World Conservation Monitoring Committee. We have something called as World Conservation Monitoring Committee. So this World Conservation Monitoring Committee, which is a committee of United Nations Environment Program, United Nations Environment Program, UNEP. So this World Conservation Monitoring Committee has set up two main criteria. There may be other, but two main criteria to classify any country with biodiversity and endemism. To classify any country as mega biodiverse countries. Mega biodiverse countries. If they have 5,000 plant species which are endemic, if they are having 5,000 plant species which are endemic, 5,000 plant species which are endemic, right? And along with that, it also talks marine ecosystem within its boundaries. Marine ecosystem within its boundaries. Now, any country satisfies these characteristics with rich in biodiversity and endemism, we refer them as mega biodiverse countries. And if you see this criteria, we find these mega biodiverse countries are within the tropical areas. That is in the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. Within the Tropic of Cancer and within the Tropic of Capricorn. Right. Marine ecosystem means coastal areas. They should have access to the coast. Coastal access. So when we calculate this, we find 17 countries are referred as mega biodiverse countries of the world. And these 17 countries, they have 10% of land of the world. So these 17 countries, they have 10% of the global land and have 70% of terrestrial biodiversity. Of the world, of the earth. 10% of the land, which is holding 70% of the terrestrial biodiversity of that. Right. So don't get confused. 5,000 plant species, it is about mega biodiversities. 1,500, it is biodiversity hotspot. Hotspot is different, mega biodiversity is different. So don't get confused. Don't get confused. So 1500 for hot spots. Mega biodiversity is different from hotspots, right? Now these 10 countries, 17 countries are United States, Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, then Brazil, then Democratic Republic of Congo, small excess is there, right? Then South Africa, Madagascar, India is also there. India is also there, which is rich with biodiversity. Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, Papua New Guinea, Philippines, and China. So remember, these are the 17 biodiverse countries, and in that, India is also referred as mega biodiversity country. Mega biodiversity country. Yes. Mega is biodiverse country. Is it clear? Okay. So this is a factual data. So India is here. So we can see them. We can see them in the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So most of them are in the tropical areas. Right. So this Alaska is part of USA. Alaska is part of USA. See, when I take biodiversity hotspot, I'll explain that. Hotspot has different criteria. India is a mega biodiverse country with 4 hotspots. With 4 biodiversity hotspots. Western Ghat is a biodiversity. They are also rich in endemism, but the criteria is instead of 1500, sorry, instead of 5000, 1500 species will be there. And another criteria are also there. But here, focus on understanding what is mega biodiversity countries. So when I take hotspots, I'll explain that in detail. Right. Now we come across something called as biogeographical realms. Now what is this biogeographical realms? Now when we talk about biogeographical realms, understand this part. Understand this part in a very simple. Now when we talk about the earth, so earth was there some 4.5 billion years. After that, after that, after that, there was formation of the crust and lands were there, right? So I'm just giving the idea of that. So this is somewhere when we say the earth some 3 billion years ago. 3 billion years ago. And then after sometimes we find the earth had large amount of the plates were created, lithosphere plates and all were created. So somewhere around 500 million years ago, 500 million years ago, we find animals started to evolve there. Plants started to evolve there. So here, plants and animals started to evolve on the Earth's lithosphere. Lithosphere. That's what we refer that as Cambrian explosion and all. Cambrian explosion and all. Now, we reached to one stage. Somewhere around 300 to 250 million years ago. 300 to 250 million years ago. Sometimes in some books they are mentioned 200 million years ago. So in that 200 million years ago, we come across a supercontinent studies. You have studied that in continental drift theory. There existed a supercontinent, and other lands were there, but still there was supercontinent was there. So the supercontinent which was existing at that time, so it consisted of plants and it also had animals. Because see, it is from 500 million years to 200 million years. So all the plant species were there and many animal species evolved at that time. Something about 200 to 300 million years ago. Then in the context of geography, we come across a theory called as continental drift theory. Continental drift theory. Or we say the plate tectonic theory. So where they say these supercontinent called as Pangea, it broke away, and Drifted. Drifted means started to move, broke away, drifted, right? So this is something like this. So this is an earth. Now this Pangea broke away and started drifting. And when the Pangea started drifting, along with that Pangea, the broken land masses carried the plants and animals with them. They carry the plants and animals with them. All the plants and animals they carried. It's like a big ship carrying the things. Big ship carrying the things. So they started drifting away. Drifting away means moving away. Moving away. Right. Now, when they started moving, then in the context of the theory, you studied that when the two plates collide, they will create mountains. Like Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian plate created Himalayas. So Indian plate colliding with the Eurasian created Himalayas. Right. And apart from that, when the two plates drifted away, like the North American plate and South American plate, when it drifted away from the Eurasian plate, that is Europe and African plate, when they moved away, that is when they are moving away, they will create oceans. So this will create oceans. So they have created oceans or water bodies, like Atlantic Ocean between North America and South America, South America, and Africa and the European Atlantic Ocean drifted. So hence these plate movements created the mountains and created large water bodies. We refer them as physical boundaries. So they created physical boundaries. They created physical boundaries. Now, physical boundaries for whom? Physical boundaries for the organisms which were there. So those organisms which stayed along with the Indian plate after the formation of Himalayas, we can't see the Indian tiger jumping and reaching in the China. So they acted as a physical barrier where the movement of the animal was restricted. Movement of the animal species or movement of the plants which can be naturally was restricted. So these physical boundaries, they made restriction of the movement. Restriction of the movement of animals and the plants. That is restriction of the flora and fauna which can be done. Now, when they were carried with the lithosphere plates, so they reached somewhere like this. They reached here, and some of the land moved to the North America. So we find North America path was there. Then after that equator, we have South America. Then we have African part. Along with that, then we have the region Mediterranean Sea, Eurasian parts, right? Then Arabian Peninsula. This is present I'm talking. Right? So we find Australia and all were there. So these lands, they stretched outside, including Antarctica, Greenland and all. So they reached to different parts. They drifted away and they reached to the different parts. So when these drifted away, so the plants and animals, they adapted to the particular environment conditions. So those animals and plants which adapted to the environmental conditions there. So those which have reached to this area, take this region. So those which are in this area, so they adapted to that area and they survived from long period of a time. And when they were isolated from physical boundaries, then they made their evolution which is unique. So this make them to have evolution. So they have their own type of evolution for millions of years. And they survived there, evolved there, and started staying in that areas, and these areas are very big areas, very big regions, and we refer them as biogeographical realms. Biogeographical realms. Is it clear? So this is what you should keep in the mind. So continental drift theory and Pangea are responsible for creating biodiversities on the earth. Yes, because of this part. So it is one reason. Apart from that, many are there. I'm not telling that continental drift theory is the only. Continental drift theory is one of the reason. Plate tectonic theory is one of the reason for creating the biodiversity on the earth, because these land masses which were carried maybe due to many reasons. So now we say it is convection currents which is carrying them. I'm not talking about the mechanism. I'm not talking about mechanism. I'm talking about the process, right? So they were drifted away. So if you are reading the geography, now they say that it is mainly due to convection currents, so that is very clear. Now I'm talking about the process which is involved, not the mechanism. So they drifted away, and those organisms which survived in the tropical areas, they become tropical biomes or tropical regions. Those who reached to the temperate regions, they adapted to that environment, cold environment, rain pattern, and they survived. So that genetic diversity made them to survive, adaptability and survived. And because of the physical barrier, what is mountains and the oceans, their evolutionary history itself is totally different. So that's why in some areas we find different animal species, some areas we find different animal species. Why? Because their adaptability is totally different to that particular environmental conditions. And this is what they created. This is what they created, the biogeographical realms of the earth. Biogeographical realms of the earth. Is it clear? So biogeographical realms means large areas of the land which relatively similar organisms, right, where they are separated by physical boundaries. So what are physical boundaries? Physical boundaries, the moment when we say mountains, oceans, etc. And this physical boundaries, this separation created a unique evolutionary history. And that is where this process led to the formation of different species here, right? And we refer them as the biogeographical realms, right? So understand that how 500 million years ago different from, see, 500 million years the life started, and from there slowly the evolution, more animals were added, more plants were added. So by 200 million years, the number of plants and number of animal species increased in their diversity, and these increased species, they started drifting from one area to another region. So here I'm telling you that initially some 500 million years ago the life started to increase in their evolution, and by 200 already the complex species were there, and this complex species, they were carried by the continental plates or the oceanic plates, what you define them as the continental drift theory. So this is where we say continental drift theory or plate tectonic theory explains the spread of biodiversity, are responsible for spreading of biodiversity. So if there would have been no plate tectonic theory, if there would have been no continental drift theory, then the spreading would have been not there, right? So hence we say one of the strong point of continental drift theory is it helped in the spreading up of biodiversity. So that's why some species reached north of equator, some reached east, and some reached to the west, and we refer them as biogeographical realms. And these areas we refer them as biogeographical realms. Right? So these biogeographical realms I'm talking: Nearctic realm, Neotropical realm, Afrotropical realm, Palearctic realm, Indomalayan realm, Australian realm, Oceania, and Antarctic realms. So these are referred as the biogeographical realms of the earth. Now, when you are reading biogeographical realms, if you take India, India shares two biogeographical realms. India shares two biogeographical realms, that is Palearctic and Indomalayan. Palearctic, and Indo-Malayan. Indo-Malayan. So hence we say India is rich in biodiversity. Indian biodiversity is very complex and rich because India shares two biogeographical realms. Yes, so when we say Western Ghats, it is a part. So here we find Western Ghats. So Western Ghats is seen. So it is a part of that, sub part of that. So just understand physical barriers which made them to have. So Western Ghats, because of its geographical location and other factors, it created something called as hotspots. So when I take hotspots, so that things will be very clear. Similar organisms means same type of species, same types of species, right, which have made the adaptive conditions ecological equivalent. Okay, now something called as biomes. So remember biosphere, biomes. So biomes are larger areas. In a very simple term, we say larger areas, larger areas. So the moment when we say larger areas, so you should remember that larger geographical areas I'm talking, larger geographical areas with same type of plants and animals with distinct or same type, larger areas, larger geographical areas, larger geographical areas, larger areas with same type of species but distinct from one another, same type of species distinct from another, right? So larger geographical areas which are having distinct, that is unique, distinct or unique plants and animal species, larger geographical area with distinct plant and animal species which have adapted to particular environment, which have adapted to particular environment, we refer them as biomes. So in a very simple term, we say biomes are larger areas, biomes are larger geographical areas with distinct or unique plants and animal species, distinct or unique plants and animal species which are adapted to the particular environment, now understand this. After this continental drift theory, the land masses were spread and hence the biodiversity has spread on the earth, biodiversity has spread on the earth, right? So it has spread from equator towards the poles, east towards the west. Now, so to study this distribution of biodiversity, to study this distribution of biodiversity, to study the distribution of this biodiversity, that is distribution of plants and animals, and also their variations, and their variations, how they vary from equator towards the poles, variation latitudinally. Latitudinally means from equator towards the poles, latitude to the latitude, latitudinally. Altitudes, height, mountains, etc. Altitudes, and continental position, right? Because we find certain animal species and plant species are inside the continent, And there are certain plants and animal species which are there in the coastal areas, so understanding their continental positions, whether they are inside or coastal, so this systematic study can be possible only when we divide it is possible only when we divide the earth into what we refer them as biomes. When we divide the earth into biomes. So what are biomes now? Biomes are larger geographical area which is having a unique or distinct plant and animal species which have evolved over a period of a time and which have adapted to the particular environmental conditions. Such larger areas we refer them as biomes, right? And these are important because it is where the study is to be done to protect and conserve them, right? So biomes are the larger geographical area with unique type of plant and animal species, distinct plant and animal species which have adapted to the particular environmental conditions, right? Now here when we talk about biomes, so generally we have many classifications, but most of the classifications, I'm talking many classifications will be there, but most classification talks about freshwater biomes, oceans, marine biomes, desert biomes. So desert biomes, again, they can be hot deserts and cold deserts. Then we are having forest biomes. Forest means they can be different type of forests are there, like tropical rainforest. Then we are having deciduous forest, etc. So within that, different subdivisions are there. Grasslands, tropical grassland, temperate grasslands, right? Then tundras, that is Arctic tundra, and the ice deposit which is there in the Himalayas, right? Ice deposits in the Himalayas. So we refer them as the major biomes, right? So this is what you should remember in the context of your discussion. 6 biomes which are there, right? So now we can have a break and we can start the class at 7:50. Yes, we can start the class at 7:50. Okay, biogeographical realms. So biogeographical realms, when we say, keep this in the mind. So that is where the plate tectonic theory, some 500 million years ago, the animal species and plant species started. And this become complex somewhere around 300 million years. And when they were drifted away, they created physical boundaries like mountains, oceans, where they made the species in complete isolation from each other. And this created a unique type of evolution to those species. We refer them as the biogeographical realms. See, we'll meet up at 7:50. It's more than 10 minutes. Right. So we'll start at 7:50. 7:55 we will start. Okay. So welcome back. Hope I'm audible as well as visible to you all, right? Done. So I'm audible as well as visible to you all. Okay, done. So we'll make a progress in the studies. So this is what we refer them as biomes. Now we'll take up the biomes, sometimes which can be seen in the prelims examination. Among them, the first biomes are forest biomes. So within the forest biome, one is the tropical rainforest. Within forest biome, we have tropical rainforest, which is in between Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. In between that, and it is very significantly seen in the three continents, that is in the South America, where we find it's very dominant along the river Amazon. Along the river Amazon, we refer that as Amazon rainforest. Then we are having the rainforest in the Africa along the river Congo basin. Congo river basin. And remember that sometimes they may ask, Congo is the only big river which crosses the equator twice. Congo is the only big river which crosses the equator twice. Congo river which crosses the equator twice. Right, so Congo river crosses the equator twice. Hope it is clear now. Right, then we have the tropical rainforest in Indonesia, Sumatra, and these areas. So three regions where the tropical rainforests are seen. And these tropical rainforests, they are very rich in biodiversity. And they are also rich in endemism. Right. And when we talk about these, so they are always associated with major issues. Like deforestation, forest fires, etc. So as they are rich in biodiversity, so we find many protected areas are there. So they are rich with many protected areas. Example, national parks are there. Then we find wildlife sanctuaries, etc. So many protected areas are there within these tropical rainforest, and they are referred as most productive. And the area which is between 0 degree, 5 degree north and south, 5 degree north and 5 degree south. So we refer this area as equatorial rainforest. So this region is referred as equatorial rainforest. 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south. We refer that as equatorial rainforest. Right. So this is a global distribution of the tropical rainforest. Now, when we take a look of the tropical rainforest, if you see the rainforests in the context of India, so in India also we find the tropical rainforests are there. But where do you find them? We find them, if you see this as in Western Ghats, this is Western Ghats, and this is eastern side of Western Ghats, and this is western side of Western Ghats. So we find the tropical rainforest in India in the western side of Western Ghats. We find them in the western side of Western Ghats. Second, we find them in the coastal regions of Tamil Nadu. Why? they receive heavy rainfall during northeast monsoon, retreating monsoon. Tamil Nadu, they receive rainfall during northeast monsoon, retreating monsoon. And we also find them in the northeastern part. We also find them in the northeastern part. Northeastern part. Right. So this is the India's tropical evergreen forest. Right. Western side of Western Ghats, because of the windward part. Windward part. And Tamil Nadu because of northeast monsoon, and then northeastern part of India. And these areas, they always have heavy rainfall. They always have heavy rainfall, heavy precipitation, right? Now, the characteristics of these tropical rainforests, the moment when we say, they always have three-layered vegetation. Three-layered vegetation, that is emergent layer, canopy layer, and undershrub layer. So this is a tree. Right. So we define them into three layers. So this is the first layer called as emergent layer. Then this is the canopy layer, and then understory shrub layer. So we always find three layers are dominant there. Yes, Andaman Nicobars are also referred. Andaman Nicobars are also evergreen forest. Yes, they are there. Right. So these are referred as the three layers. Three layers: emergent layer, canopy layer, and understory. And they always have high density of vegetation. Right. Yes, you will find them even in the Andaman Nicobar also. Three layers of vegetation. Now, what are the characteristics of these? They always receive heavy rainfall. But the tropical rainforests, when we say the equatorial rainforest, have no seasons. Equatorial rainforest, which is in between 5 degrees north and south, which is between 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south. So here it does not have seasons, no seasons, because of the apparent shifting of the sun and the presence of sun. And equatorial region always receive rainfall throughout the year because of convection. So this area receives precipitation all year. 365 days it receives rainfall by a process called as convectional type of rainfall. So hence the region 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south, that is equatorial rainforest, it will not have any seasons. No seasons are there in the equatorial rainforest, right? Then it will have always high average temperature, 20 to 35 degrees centigrades. And here it is high level of biodiversities. Nutrient poor soil, because these regions always have heavy rainfall. So because of heavy rainfall, the nutrients are washed. Much of the nutrients are washed away by normal volume of the river or by translocation in soil formation. You have read that. So heavy rainfall washes away the nutrients. And here the plant species and animal species, they are interdependent with each other. Large amount of interdependences are there. And as the density of trees is more, the trees will not be bigger, they will be taller and thin trees. So they will be tall and thin trees will be there, and they have buttress roots which supports them, and they have large amount of epiphytes which are there along with them. And these epiphytes, they are not referred as parasites. They are having support from each other. So they are not parasites. Again, take an example of this liana. Liana grows along with the trees. Again, this liana is not a parasite. They help each other. They help each other, but they are not parasitic. They don't disturb each other. Buttress means strong roots. Strong roots. This is your NCRT class 11th. You will find tilt roots, buttress root, prop roots, etc. Buttress means strong roots. Strong roots. Right. And here, if you see the animals, they are sloth with camouflage, spider monkeys flying, and toucan. So generally, we find these fauna species, they are tree dwelling. Tree dwelling. So hence we refer them as they are dominant with arborals. Tree dwelling. Tree dwelling. We refer them as arborals. Arborals. Why? Because as the density of trees is more there, the light which can reach to the ground is very less. So to reach the light, they move upward. As the trees are very dense, as the trees are very, very dense here, so there is possibility that the light which can reach to the ground is very less. So to need for a light, to need for the light for their survival, so these species, they always try to move upward. They always try to move upward. So hence, in this region, tropical rainforest or equatorial rainforest, we say the ecological niche is upward. They move towards upper side. So hence we say the ecological niche or their niche is upward. They move upward for light, for their food, and for their survival. So they have vertical ecological niche. They move upward. Vertical ecological niche. They move upward. Right. So these are the characteristics which we talk about the rainforests. Now, among these rainforest, the dominant one is the Amazon rainforest, the very dominant, which is largest rainforest of the world, tropical rainforest of the world, Amazon forest, which is the largest tropical rainforest. And this Amazon forest is often referred as lungs of planet. Lungs of planet. Why? Because it absorbs 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide. Because it absorbs 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide. And hence, as it absorbs more amount of carbon dioxide, they are referred as carbon sinks. So hence they are referred as carbon sink. Carbon sink. And apart from that, they emit oxygen. So they release around 6% to 8% of global oxygen. Global oxygen. So we refer them as the lungs of planets. Lungs of planets. And this Amazon forest is in the South America. It is in the South American continent. And it covers 40% of South America. 40% along the Amazon River. Along the Amazon River. Amazon River. Right. And it is spread in 8+1 countries. Spread in Brazil. It is spread in Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, Guyana, and Suriname. French Guiana is overseas territory of France, French Guiana. So it is spread in these countries, right? And apart from that, the major spread is in Brazil. So 60% of Amazon forest, 60% of Amazon forest is in Brazil. Is in Brazil. Now these Amazon forests, they are also referred as selva forest. They are also referred as selva forest. They are also referred as selva forest, right? Amazon forest, selva forest, Brazil. They are rich in biodiversities. endemism and all are there. But these Amazon forests, they always have the major problem with forest fires. They always have the major problem with forest fire. Now, the forest fire in the Amazon is because of two reasons. One is natural, because of dry vegetation, lightning, etc. And most of the Amazon forest fires, we refer them as man-made forest fires. Man-made forest fires. Now, what are man-made forests? What are the reasons for that? One is this Amazon area, where we find it is one of the countries which exports large amount of beef cattle population. Cattles are there. To support the cattle population, they need a pastures. They need a pasture. So they are having cattles, exporters of the beefs, and for that they need pastures. Pastures. And for that they have to cut the forest. And that is where they cut the forests by using the fire. Along with that, this Amazon region in the Brazil is known for soybean cultivation. Soybean cultivation. And to make the soybean cultivation to occur, they do the practice called as shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation. Or we refer that as slash and burn. Slash and burn. And because of these activities, we always find the Amazon forest fire is always in the news. So most of the Amazon forest fires are man-made, which are reducing the characteristic of Amazon forest. Now, if you are reading the current affairs, say 2023 report and 2024 report, they say that because of the impact of global warming and climate change, because of the impact of global warming, climate change, droughts, global warming, climate change, droughts, the Amazon forest fires have increased very high. So they have increased very high. There is increase in the forest fires. And this makes a threat that till now we find that increased forest fire, it means burning of the trees. Till now the Amazon forest is referred as carbon sink. Now if this process continued, then there is a fear that Amazon forest, which are referred as carbon sink, may become carbon emitter. The Amazon forest may become carbon emitter. Carbon emitter. Now, this is where you should remember carbon emitter means this will create which type of mechanism? Positive loop or negative loop? The Amazon forest fire and global warming, which type of loop it creates? Positive or negative feedback mechanism? Right, it is positive loop. Positive means the fire will accelerate global warming, and global warming will again accelerate the forest fires. So it is positive positive loop, and this positive is making the Amazon forest to suffer more and more. Only the negative feedback mechanism, like planting the trees, reducing the forest fires, will bring back the Amazon into normal condition. Perfect. So this is called as positive feedback mechanism, which in turn convert the Amazon from carbon sink to carbon emitter, and that will accelerate the increase of the carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which can accelerate again the same. So it is keep on continuing. So forest fires and global warming are positive feedback mechanism. One supports each other, and if it is continued for a long, then the whole ecosystem will collapse. So there is a threat that this green Amazon rainforest, if it is continued, it may become a grassland, or it may become a desert over a period of time if it is not controlled. Is it clear now? So this is what you should understand with the part. Carbon sink and sequestration are the same. Yes, carbon sink is created by sequestration. Carbon sink is result of sequestration. After sequestration, carbon is stored. Clear? Okay. Now, when we talk about this, I told that Amazon is the region which receives heavy rainfalls also. So this Amazon is having nutrients losses. This Amazon will always have the nutrients which are less. So this Amazon will have low nutrients, low nutrients, low phosphorus, or low phosphates. Now, from where it will get that? It is receiving all the phosphates, minerals, and nutrients from the largest continental desert on the earth. So, which is that largest continental desert on the earth? Fast. Largest continental desert on the earth. Sahara. Perfect. So, it receives the nutrients, phosphates, etc. from Sahara Desert. From Sahara Desert. Through the winds. Through the wind. So that's why, in spite of loss of the nutrients due to heavy rainfall, the luxury trees are there. Why? Because it is the work of winds which carry large amount of nutrients from Sahara Desert to the Amazon forest. So that's why, in spite of heavy rainfall, still we find luxurious trees are there, because the work of the winds which carry the nutrients always make immense presence of the phosphates and the nutrients in the Amazon rainforest. So that's why, in spite of heavy rainfall, we find luxury trees are there. Now, if we convert the Sahara Desert into grain forest, just an example, if we convert the Sahara Desert into rainforest, then will it affect Amazon forest? Will it affect Amazon forest? Yes, it will be affecting the Amazon forest. Right. So this is how you have to make your conclusions. So when they ask the questions, any ecosystem, when you make it change in abrupt, it will affect the global systems. Right. Okay. So this is some rough idea about the Amazon and its part. Now, among with the Amazon forest fires, we also come across the severe forest fire which took place in 2020 and 23. Now, during that severe forest fire in the year 2023 and even 2022, where the fire spread to other parts, where the forest fire spread to other parts also, which included a area which is a small part of the Amazon forest, and that is called as Panthanal wetland. Panthanal wetland. Panthanal wetland. Now, unique thing about this Panthanal wetland is it is the largest tropical wetland of the world. It is the largest tropical wetland in the world. And remember, this Panthanal wetland is spread in 3 countries. That is Paraguay. It is spread in 3 countries: Paraguay, Brazil, and Bolivia. It is spread in 3 countries. So the questions can be asked. 3 countries are there, right? Paraguay, Bolivia, and Brazil. Now, when we talk about these things, you should always remember these. Now, when you are reading current affairs, you will get some idea. It is spread in these 3 countries. That is Paraguay, Brazil, and Bolivia. Now, if you see the map of America, all the countries in the America, they will have coastal access. But only 2 countries are there which are landlocked. Only 2 countries are there which are landlocked. 2 countries which are landlocked. It means they do not have access to the coastal areas. So can you find them? Very easily you can find. So which are the 2 landlocked countries in the America which are part of Panthanal wetlands? That is Paraguay and Bolivia. This is how the questions will be asked in UPSC. Paraguay and Bolivia, which are landlocked. Paraguay and Bolivia. So Panthanal wetland is the largest wetland, and it is spread in 3 countries. Out of the 3 countries, 2 are landlocked. They are Bolivia and Paraguay. And this Panthanal wetland this panthanal wetland, because of the forest fire, around 20 to 30% of panthanal wetland was destroyed because of the forest fire. Now, the main reason here is continuously drought which was experienced there. Drought which was experienced there. Severe drought which was experienced, and there is no rainfall for 1 or 2 years, which make the vegetation completely dry, and where the forest fire becomes very easy to spread in that regions. And this panthanal wetland is a region where we are having the highest density of jaguars in the world. So it dominate with the highest density of jaguars in the world. Highest density of jaguars in the world, and it is also the region where we find giant ant eaters are there. It is also the region where we are having giant ant eaters, right? Now now when we talk about these, if there is a continuously forest fires are there, then there will be a problem of survival of these jaguars and anteaters. Now this experienced drought because of rainfall patterns, El Nino and other patterns, where the precipitation was less, Is it clear? So country name they are same: Bolivia, Paraguay, and Brazil. Paraguay and Brazil. So this is how you have to read your map and link that with your current affairs, right? Now, another area where we find the tropical rainforest is Indonesia. And Sumatra. Indonesia and Sumatra in the Pacific Ocean. So this region, Indonesia and Sumatra, where Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean. So two ocean confluences are there: Pacific, Indian Ocean. Right. Now this Indonesia and Sumatra is also referred as tropical rainforest. It is also tropical rainforest. And here also we find it is always associated with forest fires. Always associated with forest fire. Now, what are the reasons for forest fires? Man-made reasons. Man-made reasons here. Man-made reasons here is much of the areas in this Indonesia and Sumatra, they are used for cultivation of palm oil. Palm oil cultivation. Palm oil cultivation. Then large areas of forest are converted into agriculture. Large areas are converted into agriculture. More specifically in Indonesia. So because of that, because of man-made factors like palm oil cultivation and converting them into agriculture, so man-made forest fires have increased in Indonesia and Sumatran forest fires also. Now, what is the impact of this forest fires in this? As I told that these forest fires are very rich in biodiversities, and they are rich with endemism also. So here also we find some unique things which are having a threat. And the threat is that in this region we come across certain species of the animals, like the largest flower in the world, which we refer them as Rafflesia arnoldi. And then it is a region where we are having Sumatran elephant, shortest among all the elephant breed. Among all the African elephants are very big. Sumatran elephant. Then we are having Komodo dragon, which are dominant to this. Now your homework is to identify what is the IUCN category of Sumatra dragon and what is the IUCN category of Komodo dragon and Sumatran elephant. Yes, this flower is dangerous because it is insectivorous. It is something which we say carnivore. So it will have a foul smell, and the insects reach to that foul, something rotten meat like smell will be there. Insects enter to eat that, and it will cover the lid and it. So it is something which we say a carnivore type of flower. Carnivore type of flowers. So I'm just giving you an idea. Sumatran elephant, Komodo dragon. So try to find out because spoon feeding will not help you. So try to find out Sumatran elephant and Komodo dragon are in which category of IUCN list. Right. Now, along with this, large amount of forest fire which took place there from 1950, and if you take the data of 2020, entire Sumatra and Borneo forest fires were destroyed, and that is where we find the Sumatran orangutan and Bornean orangutan. So we come across these Sumatran and Bornean orangutan. So due to large amount of forest fires which have been destroyed there, the Bornean forest which has been destroyed. So the number of the Sumatran and orangutan, Bornean orangutan, they decreased. I'm repeating, their number decreased. Their numbers decreased to so low that their number decreased to so low that now they are classified as critically endangered species. So both the species are referred as critically endangered species. Critically endangered species. Perfect. Yes, Sumatran elephant is critically endangered and Komodo dragon is endangered. Perfect. So this is how you have to make your notes when you are reading current affairs. If you make them, that's sufficient. And then if you revise that, it is easy for you to remember. That's how you have to make the process. Is that clear? So orangutans, they are very less in the number. So what happens whenever forest fires are there? The numbers of the animals decreases because of death and injuries. The numbers will decrease because of death and injuries. That is one. And what is another way which affects the animal species? When the forest fires are there, they leave the forest area. And move down to the surrounding region. So when they move on to the surrounding regions, what will happen? Man-animal conflict. Man-animal conflict. Animal conflict. Now, in both the cases, there will be severe decrease in the number of species. Human beings can also be killed. Orangutans can also be killed. Domestic animals can also be killed. Right. So here you should remember these orangutans. They are found in different Sumatra and Borneo. So this is Sumatra and this is Borneo. So in both the areas we find this, and this has made a threat to the national parks which are there, the species which are surviving in that areas. So this is how you have to make your understanding of the topic and implement them with the basic concepts. I don't think it is very difficult. So we are moving in a very slow phase, but in a systematic order. Right. Then we talk about deciduous forests. So what are a deciduous forest? The moment when we say deciduous means shedding a part of a tree. Deciduous means shedding a part of a tree. Which is not needed. Shedding a part of a tree which is not needed. Right. Now, what part and what shedding? So generally these deciduous trees, they shed their part. It means they drop their leaves. That means they drop their leaves. And this dropping of a leaves is a mode of adaptation. Dropping of leaves is mode of adaptation. Mode of adaptation. Now, based on their period of shedding leaves and location, we classify the deciduous trees into two categories: tropical deciduous and temperate deciduous. Tropical deciduous and temperate deciduous. Tropical deciduous the moment when we say they shed their leaves during summer season. The tropical deciduous, they shed their leaves during summer season. Summer season. That is, in the summer season, there is always scarcity of water. So it is shedding the leaves in the summer season for 6 to 8 weeks. It is to conserve the water. Conserve the water. Right. Why? Because if you take the leaves of the plants, right? Now, the gas which is exchanged from the leaves of the plants, the gas which is exchanged from the leaves of the plant, we refer that as what term? The release of the gases from the leaves of the plants. So generally, from the water surfaces, we refer that as evaporation. From the water surfaces, we refer that as evaporation. And when it is released from the leaves of the plants, we refer that as transpiration. So it is transpiration. Perfect. It is transpiration. Is it clear? So when we talk about the tropical deciduous trees, so tropical deciduous trees, they shed their leaves during the summer season to conserve the water, so that if there are no leaves, then there will be no transpiration, so no wastage of water. So this is tropical deciduous adaptation for summer. Adaptation for summer. Right. Now, temperate deciduous forest. Now, temperate deciduous forest, when we see, they experience extreme winter. They experience extreme winter. Extreme winter. Why? Because of apparent shifting of the sun. If you take that 30 to 40 degree latitudes, or that 40 to 50 degree, we always find when the sun is there in the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn will be having extreme cold. When the sun moves to the Tropic of Capricorn, then the Tropic of Cancer will be having the extreme cold. So the same area in the summer season, they are having high temperature, and the same area during the winter season, they will be having extreme low temperature. I'll repeat. In the summer season, if you take this region, when the sun is present here, they will have summer conditions, and these areas will experience winter, extreme winter. When the sun moves to the Tropic of Capricorn, now this area will be having summer, and this area will be having extreme winter. So they always have extreme winter conditions. So this extreme winter condition can harm the plant's tissues. So they can harm the plant tissues. Harm the plant tissues, or excess water can destroy them. So what they do is to protect themselves from the extreme winter condition. So before winter, they shed their leaves. So protect or prevent from extreme cold temperature or cold winter. Before winter, they shed their leaves. And this process where they shed their leaves is seen as a unique or separate session or season called as fall season. It is called as fall season. Fall season. So temperate deciduous trees, they shed their leaves during winter adaptation. Is that clear? So tropical and temperate deciduous forests. So whenever you are reading, you should keep that in the mind. Tropical and temperate deciduous forests. Tropical, temperate. So this is for winter and one is for summer. Right now, where do you find the temperate deciduous? So temperate deciduous we will find in all the continents, eastern side of North America as well as western side, western part of Europe, eastern part of China and Japan. Then also we find in the western part of South America and Australia. So these are the areas where we find. And here the temperature varies from minus 30 to plus 30 because of apparent shifting of the sun. So hence they will be having hot summers and cold winters. And here they are having 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer and fall. Fall season where the leaves drops, and after the fall, winter follows. So remember, after the fall, winter follows. After the fall season, the winter follows. Deciduous means shedding a part of a tree. Now here, you should remember that during the winter season, there is a absence of sunlight, and this absence of sunlight makes the chlorophyll deficiency. So here, sometimes we will find chlorophyll deficiency will be there. Chlorophyll deficiency during the season when the sun is not present in the areas. So that chlorophyll deficiency makes the trees to change their colors. Chlorophyll deficiency makes the leaves to change their colors. So that's why in the European countries, before the fall season, before the fall season, the trees leaves changes their color, and when they fall, red colored, golden color leaves will be there on the ground areas, right? So they change their color, and after that, fall season is there. Why they change in the color? Because of lack of chlorophyll development due to lack of the sunlight which is there, right? And these leaves are broadleaf. They are broadleaf. And they are hardwoods. Chlorophyll deficiency means there is photosynthetic active radiations will not be there, so photosynthesis will be weak. So when the photosynthesis is weak, then chlorophyll will be less developed. So weak photosynthesis, less chlorophyll, right? Now here we find these. See, this is where you should remember: broadleaves, hardwoods, and changing the leaves. So here we find the animal species which can be terrestrial, and also we find certain species which are arboreal, but more terrestrial species we find. More terrestrial species are there and very few arboreals. Deer, rodents, birds are arboreals, owls are arboreal. So we find such type of species in this areas, right? Now next is the tropical deciduous. Now these are found in the margins of equatorial and tropical rainforest, equatorial rainforest and the tropical rainforest, where the rainfall is 70 to 200. And here we always find heavy rainfall followed by dry season. And they shed their leaves 6 to 8 weeks in the summer. Why? Because it is an adaptation for summer. Adaptation for water scarcity. Right. Then they have local names. Tropical deciduous forests have local names. In Brazil, they are referred as Katanga. So remember this. Sometimes they may ask in the prelims, match the following. Right. So tropical deciduous. In Brazil, they are referred as Katanga. And in Paraguay and North Argentina, they are referred as Chaco. Selva is rainforest. Chaco is deciduous forest. Right. Then in Australia, we refer them as Brigalow curb. And in South Africa, they are referred as Dornwild. So these are the local names for the tropical deciduous forest. Country wise, region wise, we refer them. Sometimes they may ask in the prelims. Now, in India, when we talk, we always define India as deciduous forest. Indian forest is dominant with deciduous. And this deciduous forest in India, we have both types of dyes are there, dry and moist deciduous. And generally this deciduous forest in India, we refer them by one more name called as monsoon forest. We refer them as monsoon forest. Monsoon forest. Right. And it is covering large portion of India. It is covered in the large portion in India. Now, in India, when we talk about this deciduous forest, we can classify them into two major subdivisions, two regions where rainfall is more and rainfall is less. We refer them as wet deciduous and dry deciduous. Wet and dry deciduous. So, wet deciduous we can find in the region where it receives heavy rainfall, that is 100 to 200 centimeters of rainfall. Now, where do you find that? See, windward region of the Western Ghats will get heavy rainfall, but the leeward will be having less rainfall. So it will be in the leeward region of Western Ghats. So we can find them in the leeward of Western Ghats. Leeward means eastern side of Western Ghats. Now, western side of Western Ghats will be having tropical rainforest. Windward side, leeward side, rain shadows, you will have the rainfall comparatively less than tropical. So here we will find them in the Western Ghats. Apart from that, foothills of Himalayas, Terai regions, foothills of Himalayas, foothills of Himalayas, right? And apart from foothills of Himalayas, where else we can find them? We can find them in the areas like Odisha, in the Odisha. So we refer them as wet deciduous forest. Now, what are the types of forests, species or plant species we can find them? The plant species we can find here is, any idea? Sandalwood. Sandalwood, which is found in the Western Ghats. Along with that sandalwood, we also find sal and teak trees are there. Sal trees. Teak trees are there. Perfect. Sal and teak are there. Now, dry deciduous. So, dry deciduous, perfect. Sagwan tree, we can find them. Then, dry deciduous is an area where we find the rainfall from 70 to 100 centimeters. 70 to 100 centimeters. Now, where do you find this? So, they are found in the plains of UP. We find them in the plains of UP and peninsular region, all other areas there. So, we find them in the plains of UP. Red sanders, you can find them in the dry deciduous. Red sanders, you can find them in the, yes, you can say, yes, red sanders also you can find in the Seshachalam, right? Seshachalam, you can find Eastern Ghats, Seshachalam, that movie, Pushpa, right? So red sanders, you can find them in that Seshachalam hills. Perfect. Right, plains of UP, parts of Bihar, and along with that, we find them in the plateau regions. And here we find the trees which are not luxurious. So here we find the plants which are not luxurious, like neem, tendu. Perfect. Tendu, neem, and we also have bale trees, etc. Right, babul, neem, tendu, which are referred as dry deciduous. Perfect. 40% of all forests in India are dry deciduous. So this is the maximum forest in India. So if you keep these data, I don't think you will have any difficulty in marking the answers correct in the context of UPSC. So this is all about India's dry deciduous, where you find, and wet deciduous, where you find, and the reason for that. So these are referred as the areas where rainfall is comparatively less here. Perfect. Okay. Now, next we move on to coniferous forest. Now, the moment when we say coniferous forest, so you should understand certain terms associated with the coniferous forest. Now, the moment when we say coniferous, you have to remember that they are found in the regions of 50 to 60 degrees only in the north hemisphere. 50 to 60 degrees in the north hemisphere, only in the northern hemisphere. And here the rainfall is 30 to 90 centimeters. And because of cold climatic conditions and because of small rainfall, even though we find there. So this region is having acidic soil. So I told that abiotic factors, cold areas will have acidic soil. So here you will have acidic soils and low nutrients with the soils. So 50 to 60 degree latitudes only in the northern part, and temperature is very less, -40. Why? Because apparent shifting of the sun. Now, these coniferous forest, when we use the terminologies, there is a Russian name which is given to this coniferous forest, and the Russian name is taiga. A Russian name given to this coniferous, we refer that as taiga. Taiga is Russian name. Right. Now, apart from that, there is possibility that the density of the coniferous trees will be more in some areas. There is possibility that where we find density of the trees will be more, and this we can find in Canada. Density of trees which is more in this Canada part of USA, and that region where we find the density of trees are more in the Canada, we refer them as boreal forest. So they are referred as boreal forest, which is seen in Canada, right? So remember, coniferous forest have names, Russian name called as taiga, and it is a region where we find the density of trees is more in certain patches like Canada, and it is referred as boreal forest. So boreal forest is coniferous, taiga is a coniferous. Now here we find the winter seasons are very harsh, and they receive the precipitation in the form of snow or in the form of ice. Precipitations are snow, right? Yes, organic will be there, but nutrients will be less there. Humus will be more because low temperature, low bacteria. So low bacteria means they will be having large amount of content will be there. Large amount of organic humus will be there. I'm not talking about that humus. They will be having less nutrients. Humus will be there, but the nutrients will be less here. So as they are having large amount of extreme winter conditions and precipitation in the form of snow and ice, so normal leaves cannot sustain. So what they do, so they make an adaptation. So what adaptation they have done? So instead of leaves, the leaves are replaced by needles. Yes, oxylophytes, that is acid tolerant. Oxylophytes, acid tolerance, right? So leaves are modified into needles, right? And the flowers are modified into cones. This is how the modification is done for their survival in the coniferous forest. So here we find this modification where we find the leaves are modified into needles and the flowers are modified or replaced by the cones. So these are the cones and these are the needles. And the vegetation, the trees are spruce, fir, pine. And here we find the dominant of animal species like reindeers, caribou, reindeers and caribou. Is it clear? And this is a region where we find the tallest and the largest trees of the world are there. We have the tallest trees in the world and the largest trees in the world. They are in the news. Tallest and the largest trees in the world, and they are used for developing newsprints, pulps, and matchsticks. And they are used in developing the matchsticks or matchbox, right? So they are having high economical values. They are used for newsprint, Because large vegetation means, when we say large trees, they don't have high density, so the trees will grow abundantly. Undisturbed trees will grow abundantly in that areas. So this is some rough idea about their vegetation, right? So because of the drought conditions, this giant sequoia has made some losses due to the fire there. Yes, in Canada we can find them. In Canada we can find them. The boreal forest, and in some areas where luxuries are there. Perfect. Right. Plant and animal species. Then we move on to Mediterranean scrubland. Mediterranean scrubland. Now, this is where you have to understand your geography part also. This Mediterranean scrubland is found in the region of 30 to 40 degree latitudes in the western margins of continents. It is found in the 30 to 40 degree latitudes only in the western margins of continent. Western margins of continent, 30 to 40 degrees in the western margins of continents. Western margins of continents, Mediterranean scrubland. Right. Now, this Mediterranean scrubland has a unique type of climate. It is having a unique type of climate which receives the rainfall during more rainfall during winter season. More rainfall during winter season. In the winter, they receive more precipitation. Why? Why? Due to shifting of pressure belts. Due to shifting of pressure belts. Right. And I have explained that, or more specifically, when we see them, the trade winds and westerlies impact. So during the winter season, these areas come under the impact of westerlies. Under the impact of westerlies. And these westerlies become onshore here. Onshore. And these onshores, they will provide good amount of precipitation during the winter season. So hence they receive the rainfall during winter season. And because of that, this areas, they don't have big trees. They don't have big trees. No big trees. The trees are short. The trees are short. And as the trees are short, they are referred as scrublands. So we find large amount of shrubs are there. And hence it is referred as the scrublands. Scrublands, short trees. And along with the short trees, to protect themselves in the rainy season, that is in the winter, the leaves are fleshy and slippery. The leaves, they are fleshy and slippery. Right. And such types of vegetation we refer that as sclerophyllous. 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 Right. And when we talk about this region 30 to 40 degree, it is having the name. In California it is called as chaparral, and in France it is called as maquis. In Chile it is called as matral. In South Africa it is called as fynbos, and in Australia it is called as mallee. Now, because of such climatic conditions, this region is known for growing lemons, oranges, grapes, etc. Lemons, oranges, grapes, etc. So hence this region is dominant for citric fruits. Citric cultivation. Citric cultivation, which is known for growing of lemons, oranges, grapes, etc. Right, it is a region of citric. Fleshy because sometimes when the rainfall is there in the winter season, so if the leaves are not slippery, not fleshy, then they can't sustain the cold temperature. Right. So this is some rough idea about the vegetation there. Right. Now if you see the shapes, so they are shrublands, short and stunted. Stunted trees with the slippery leaves. With the fleshy and slippery leaves. Right. Now, within this Mediterranean climate, or within this Mediterranean shrub, the geographical area surrounding Mediterranean Sea, the geographical area surrounding Mediterranean Sea, Mediterranean Sea, geographical area surrounding Mediterranean Sea. So this geographical area, which is surrounding the Mediterranean Sea, is known for growing of grapes and processing of the grapes. And this region is known for best quality of the grapes and best quality of the wines. We refer this as viticulture. So the area surrounding Mediterranean Sea, the area surrounding Mediterranean Sea is known for growing the best variety of grapes. We refer that as viticulture. Viticulture, right? And hence all this area, 30 to 40-degree latitudes, or what we say the Mediterranean region, all these areas where we find citrus cultivations are there, grapes cultivations are there, we refer this as orchard lands of the world. We refer that as orchard lands of the world, of the world. Now don't confuse orchard with orchid. Orchid is a flower. Don't confuse this. Orchid is a flower. Is a flower. I'm not talking about orchid. I'm talking about orchard. Orchard means it is a plant cultivation. Plants like lemons, oranges. We refer that as orchard cultivation. So Mediterranean scrubland is referred as orchard lands of the world, where we find dominant citric cultivation is there, including lemon, oranges, and the grapes, right? And this is an area, Mediterranean area, which is known for grapes. We refer them as viticulture. Viticulture. Is it clear? So this is something about coniferous forests. Coniferous forest. Then we move on to grasslands. Now, the moment when you talk about the grasslands, right? So remember that this grassland is found in all the continent except Antarctica. It is found in all the continents. Found in all continents except Antarctica. Except Antarctica. Right? And this biome, grassland biome, is the one which is most modified by human activities. This is the biome. This biome is most modified biome by human beings. Why? Because they are converting the grasslands for agricultural activities. Because they are converting the grasslands for agricultural activities. It means that the grasslands are fertile. It means the soil is fertile. The soil is fertile here, right? And that's why we say the grasslands, the soils of the grasslands, they are perfect for crops as well as pastures. The soils, they are perfect for crops and pastures. Crops and pastures. Yes, they prevent the soil erosion also. They prevent the soil erosion. So hence they are fertile. They are fertile. So they are one which, right. And these grasslands are always associated with forest fires. Major component of the grassland component is forest fire. So when I take forest module, I'll explain in detail about forest fires, reasons and advantage. When I take forest module, I'll explain that in detail. But here just understand forest fire. So forest fire is dominant in the grassland. It is dominant. It is dominant. And this forest fire can be natural and it can be man-made also. We'll see them in detail when I take forest biome. Right, now this is something about grasslands. Now these grasslands are classified on the basis of their position and their characteristics. So grasslands are classified into two types. They are classified into two types, right? So these grasslands, based on their position, the grasslands which are in between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, we refer this as tropical grasslands. Tropical grasslands, or we refer them as savanna, right? So they can be tropical grasslands. And the another type of grasslands which we find beyond the tropics, we refer them as temperate grasslands. Right? So tropical grasslands and temperate grasslands. So two types of grasslands are there: tropical and temperate grasslands, and they are classified on the basis of their position and type of vegetation. And remember that vegetation is a result of climatic factors. Vegetation is a result of climatic factor, result of abiotic factor, what we say, abiotic factors, right? Abiotic factor means light, rainfall, soil, etc. Tropical as well as temperate grasslands, right? Now next is tropical grasslands. So these tropical grasslands, they are found in the tropical areas near the equator, and here the rainfall is 76 centimeters to 100 centimeters. The temperature is always high, 21 to 26 degrees, and the soil is thin and porous. Because of this porosity, they are fertile. Right? And these tropical grasslands, they are having local names. In Africa, we refer them as Sahel. Region. It is the largest area. Right? Now Sahel is tropical grassland. Now remember, Sahel separates the largest desert of the earth, that is Sahara Desert, from the fertile South Africa, fertile land. Right? So Sahel is a region which is in between that. Sahel region. Then in Brazil it is called as Campos. And in Venezuela it is referred as Luna. So these are the local names. And if you take these areas, so these areas, they always have dominant of the species. They have the tallest mammal in the world, and that is giraffe. And these are the areas where we also find they are the regions where we have the largest territorial mammal. Largest mammal on the earth is largest mammal on the earth. So here we find the largest terrestrial mammal. Largest terrestrial mammal is elephant. And the largest mammal on the earth is whale. So when we talk about largest mammal, it is in the water bodies whale, and terrestrial mammal is elephant. So here we find the tallest mammals of the earth and the largest terrestrial mammals of the earth, elephants, which are dominant in these areas. We refer them as tropical rain forest, or we call them as savanna. Right? So dominant in Sahel region, Brazil, Venezuela, Sahel, Sahara Desert, and the fertile land of that. So it is in between. It is in between that. Right now, when we talk about the characteristics of these, this region always receives rainfall. So here we always find the vegetation is combination. Vegetation is combination of grass and trees. Grass is also there, trees are also there. So sometimes when you enter into the park, you will find the lawns of grasses are there, and in between the trees are there. So hence it is referred as park like vegetation. It is referred as park like vegetation. Park like vegetation, right? And as there is less rainfall, the trees has to protect the water. So to conserve the water, to conserve the water or to hold the water, the trees here are umbrella shaped or flat shaped. The trees here are umbrella shape or flat shape. Flat top or umbrella shape. Umbrella shape, right? So we find there is a combination, park like. Now the tropical grassland is different from temperate grassland in two reasons. One is the grasses are long. The grasses are long here, long grasses. And second one is it is a combination of tree and grasses. Then only we refer that as savanna. It is a combination of tree plus grass. Both should be there. If you are talking about only grass, then it is not called as tropical grassland. It is not called as savanna. Savanna means it should mandatorily consist of the park like combination, that is tree along with the grasses, right? They always have such combinations, grasses with the tree. Now why we find certain areas that do not have the trees, why it is not covered continuously with the trees? Because sometimes when you find rainfalls are there, sometimes we find rainfalls are there, there is possibility that the entire area can be covered with trees. So it can convert itself from grassland to trees. Combination of trees and grass can be converted into completely a tree area where it can convert into forest. But why it looks like the combination of tree and grasses? Now this is where you have to understand that there is one organism which is making this presence where it is showing the combination of trees and grasses, and this organism is what we refer them as elephant. So when we talk about this elephant, so this elephant, it uproots the trees, it uproots the trees, uproots the trees like acacia trees. It removes the small trees from the ground. So when it uproots the trees, then that area is the region where the grasses grows. Grasses grows. Right. Now, if you remove the elephant in that region, if you remove the elephant from if you remove the elephant from this Sahel region, then can it still maintain the tree and park combination? If you remove the elephant from that, if you remove elephant, then will it maintain the same type of grass and tree combination? No. So it will not maintain, it will not maintain the park like combination. So hence it is the presence of elephant which is providing the characteristic of the park like vegetation to the tropical grasslands. So hence such animals we refer them as keystone species. Such animals we refer them as keystone species. So elephant here is an example of keystone species. Keystone species. A very important example. So what are keystone species? So keystone species are the species which may be smaller in the number. Elephant may be very less. They may be smaller in the number. Smaller in number. But their presence maintains the ecosystem. Their presence maintains the ecosystem. If you remove the keystone species, then the ecosystem will collapse. Their removal will make the collapsing of ecosystem. It means that the park-like will be converted either into forest area or some other region. So entire ecosystem will collapse. And hence, this type of species, we refer them as keystone species. Now, keystone species necessarily, they should not be herbivore. They can be carnivore also. They can be both. Keystone species can be both. They can be herbivore or they can be carnivore. Now, can you give any example of the presence of carnivore which protects the grasslands in some other areas? Which can protect the grasslands in some other areas? Any example of carnivore which can be referred as the keystone species? Perfect. So cheetahs are there. Deer is a keystone species for some other reason. So I'm asking about the grasslands. To protect the grasslands, tigers are there, cheetahs are there. So tigers and cheetahs, they eat up more deers so that the grassland will not convert into desert. Grassland will not convert into deserts. Right. Perfect. So these are called as keystone species. So what are keystone species? Those species whose numbers may be less, but their presence is very, very important to maintain the ecosystem. If you remove the keystone species from the ecosystem, then the entire ecosystem will collapse. So here we made an effort in understanding the term called as keystone species. Now, the example of keystone species in the tropical grassland is elephant. Yes, perfect. All are there, but for this, elephant is there. Clear? Okay. Now we move on to the temperate grasslands. So temperate grasslands, they are found beyond the tropics. And they have the local names like prairies in North America, pampas in South America, veld in the South America, steppes in South America. So they are having the local names. Right. So which role you are talking, Arjun? Which role there? So elephant species, they are responsible for maintaining the park-like vegetation. It is their niche. They perform their activity by which the ecosystem is maintained. They're not doing that because of certain consideration. The activity itself is such, and because of that activity, the park-like vegetation is maintained. So that's why just understand the definition of ecological niche: the habitat, their activity, their occupation, which maintains the ecosystem. Right. So they are found beyond the tropics, and these are the grasslands which are converted for agricultural fields. Instead of grasses, they are growing large amount of the agriculture crops here. If you take the prairies in North America, so these prairies are the regions where we find they have removed prairies, and instead of that we find large amount of wheat cultivation is done. So hence prairies are referred as wheat basket of the world or bread basket of the world. They are referred as bread basket of the world or wheat basket of the world. Wheat basket of the world. Right. Okay. So park-like vegetation is nothing but tropical grassland. Right. Now deserts. Now deserts, when we say deserts, they can be of two types. We find them warm deserts and we find them as cold deserts. Now generally when we talk about the warm deserts, we find them in the tropical areas. That is around 20 to 30 degree latitudes, 30 degree in the western margins. In the western margins, warm deserts we find 30 degree latitudes in the western margins of the continent. Right. Now there is a reason for that. The reason is this is a region where we find the presence of subtropical high pressure belt. Geography, just revise that. Due to the presence of subtropical high pressure belt. High pressure belt, it is a region where the wind descends rather than ascending, so no rainfall. So this is a region where we find offshore trade winds are there. Offshore trade winds. Trade winds. Trade winds. And this is a region, most areas where we refer them as the rain shadow of the mountains. We refer them as they are in the leeward side. Leeward or rain shadow. And fourth one is due to the upwelling of water, cold currents, cold ocean currents. Now the best example of this cold ocean current is this Atacama Desert. Atacama Desert. So if you see this Atacama Desert is formed because of cold Peru current. Cold Peru current. So because of these, yeah, Peru current is also referred as Humboldt. Another name for Peru current is Humboldt current. So because of that, we find the deserts are dominant there. So we have warm deserts, and at higher altitudes and higher latitudes like Gobi Desert, Ladakh deserts, we find cold deserts. We have cold deserts like Ladakh, Gobi, where we find warm deserts. You can give examples is Atacama Desert, Sahara Desert, Thar Desert. So these all are warm deserts. Sahara Desert, Thar deserts, etc. Is it clear? Now, the largest continental desert is Sahara, and the largest desert in the context of Earth, we refer that as Antarctica. Antarctica is not classified as tundra. Antarctica is a desert. Antarctica is a desert. And it is the largest desert in the world. Largest desert in the world. Why? Because this receives low precipitation. Low precipitation. Right. Siberia, when we say Siberia is cold region, but it is called as tundra. It is tundra. It is not the desert. So remember, if you take this as an earth, so this portion, Antarctica, is called as desert. And here, the cold areas, we don't call them as desert. We refer them as tundras. Tundra is different from this. So please remember, Antarctica is a desert. Is a desert. Even though it is cold, but it is called as a desert because of low velocity of the wind, low precipitation of the winds here, right? And when we talk about the cold deserts, so we find them sensitive vegetations are there. In the cold areas, we find sensitive vegetations are there, like we have lichens and mosses. Right. And if you take warm deserts, that is hot deserts. So in the hot deserts, we always find the large area is open. Large area is open. Large open areas. Large open areas. And here we find the diurnal temperature is very high. Day's temperature are very high, and the night temperatures are very low. So extreme temperatures are found here. Extreme temperatures are formed, right? And this is an area where we find the plants make an adaptation for high temperature and scarcity of water. We refer them as xerophytes. Xerophytes. So xerophytes means they will be having fleshy leaves and fleshy stems, plus they have the thorns, needles, like cactus. They have the thorns, thorns which protect them from the animals which can eat, and they have sunken stomata. They do not have the stomatas, which can lead to transpiration, right? Transpiration. So these are the type of adaptation which are seen here in the desert areas. Large area is open there, and these are the areas which can be referred as hot desert as well as cold deserts. Yes, right. And this you already seen in the context of your geography. Now, if any desert is filled with the sand, if any desert which is filled with the sand, we refer them as ergs. We refer them as erg, sand desert. Example of the ergs is the Thar desert, Sahara desert, Sahara desert. If any desert where the dominant of stones are there, dominant of stones are there, then we refer them as regs. Now try to find out examples of this. Regs, stone dominant, right? And where we find dominance of rocks are there. So we refer them as hamadas. Right? So dominant as hamadas. See, I never told that tundra is a desert. I said that in the Arctic we find tundra. Antarctica is not called as tundra. Antarctica is a desert. Antarctica is a desert. I never told tundra. I told Siberia is a tundra. Even though it is having cold temperature, it is tundra. It is classified as tundra, but not the desert. Only the Antarctica is referred as the desert part because of low rainfall. Right. So Hamdas and this. Try to find example for this. So we may have the rocky deserts, presence of rocky desert. We may have stony deserts, and we may have sandy deserts. Sandy desert. A unique characteristic of sandy desert is shifting sand dunes. Shifting sand dunes. Thar desert. Shifting sand dunes. Right. Okay. Right. Now, when we talk about the tundra, that is the last biome, tundra, it is derived from the Finnish word tuntura. It is derived from the Finnish word tuntura, that is barren land. Barren land. Right. Barren land, tuntura or barren land. Right. So large amount of area is barren here, tundra. Now, this is a region where we find always thick ice deposits are there, permafrost, so permanently frozen ice. Permanently frozen ice. Frozen ice. And this is a region where we find a precipitation is less than 25 centimeters. And this tundra covers 10% of the earth. 10% of the earth. Now, this tundra is classified into two types. Tundra is classified into two types. The tundra which is found, two types. The tundra which is found near the Arctic, we refer that as Arctic tundra. And the tundra which is found near the equator, sometimes at higher altitudes, like Himalayas and Alps mountain. Himalayas and Alps mountain, we refer that as alpine tundra. Alpine tundra. So two types of tundras are there: Arctic tundra and alpine tundra. Alpine tundra, like Himalayas, Alps mountain, right? So here we find the less growing seasons are there. In the Arctic, it is having 50 to 60 days because light deficiency will be there. And in the alpine, there will be 180 days of growing. So hence alpine tundra will have more vegetation than Arctic. Will have more vegetation than Arctic tundra. more vegetation than Arctic tundra. Yes, you can say wherever high altitudes are there, wherever ice deposits are there, Andes you can take, Rockies, Andes you can say, Alps mountain, where we find ice deposits are there. So they will be having variation in the growing season, 50 days to 60 days and 180 days in the alpine tundra. And they will always have fragile vegetation. Fragile means sensitive vegetation. Sensitive vegetation. So two types of tundras are there, Arctic and the alpine tundra. No, never mention Antarctica as tundra. Antarctica is a desert. Antarctica is a desert. So Arctic tundra, when we say, it includes Greenland, it includes Northern American part, and it includes Eurasian part, including that Arctic area. So we refer this as Arctic tundra. Arctic tundra. And these areas we refer them as alpine tundras. Alpine tundras, right? Now, the moment when we talk about Arctic tundra, the moment when we say the Arctic tundra and all, remember that these Arctic tundras, they have large amount of dead plants and animals which are stored there. So Arctic tundra is referred as one of the major carbon sink. Major carbon sink of the earth. It has large amount of the ice deposits are there. And within that ice deposits, undecomposed woods are there. Undecomposed woods. So undecomposed woods, we refer them as peats. So it is known as peat land. Undecomposed wood. Undecomposed wood are there. And that is where we say the melting of glacier. The melting of glacier will make Arctic to convert from carbon sink to carbon emitter. So there is a major threat with the Arctic ice here. Right. Apart from that, this region always have cold winds called as blizzards. Cold winds, example, blizzards are there. Right. And to protect themselves from the extreme cold conditions, we find Eskimos. They construct their house called as igloos. Igloos to protect themselves. So these are igloos which protect them. So this is something about the Arctic. Now, when we talk about about the alpine vegetation, so alpine regions are found at high altitudes. That is heights. That is at the heights. And here the major issue associated again is melting of ice. So even the alpine tundras are also comparatively melting. And apart from that, these areas are having the problem of seasonal movement of livestock with the animals. We refer them as transhumans. So they are affected by transhumans activity, seasonal movement of the animals there. And that is why the vegetation is under the threat. So this is all about the Arctic and what we refer them as the alpine tundra. Fragile means sensitive ecosystems. Is it clear? Now, in a very simple term, when we say the vegetations there, the Arctic region will have Arctic fox, musk ox, snow geese, polar bear. So these are found in the Arctic tundra. But if you see the alpine tundras, so alpine tundras will have marmot, mountain goat. So these are in the alpine. These are the Arctic tundras. Yes, snow leopards are also there. I'm giving an example. Snow leopards, clouded leopards, you can put. Snow leopards, clouded leopards. So such type of species you can find there. Right. So in India, we find snow leopards are there. We have clouded leopards in that high altitude regions. So we find them in that regions. Perfect. You can find them. Bhugyals, yes, bhugyals are something which we find them in the Uttarakhand, I guess. Uttarakhand, you are having bhugyals. And in Kashmir, we refer them as murgs. In Kashmir, we call them as murgs. Bhugyals in Uttarakhand. Gulmarg, Sonmarg of Kashmir. Bhugyals in Uttarakhand. Yes, we can find them. Now, Biome, the definition what I told, the same thing. That is, it is having the combination of plants and animals, which are unique to their characteristics. We refer them as the biomes, right? Biomes of this. Now, another 2 minutes and we'll conclude, so that you can remind that for your tomorrow's class. So when we talk about this ecosystem and all, so remember one thing, that if you put them graphically, so if this is the graph where you want to put, so this is dry region, and this is where we make it wet, and this is hot temperature, and this is cold area, dry and wet. Now here, when we demarcate that regions, the region where we find hot temperatures are there, the regions where hot temperatures and dry areas, we have hot deserts. Now the regions where we find the temperature is also high and rainfall is also very high, we refer them as tropical evergreen forests. So here, tropical evergreen, right? And this region, where the rainfall is less than tropical evergreen and the temperature is same, so we have tropical deciduous forest, right? And then where the rainfall is still less than that, so we are having tropical grassland, tropical grassland grassland. And when you move on to bit more upper side, where the temperature decreases, so there we find the vegetations and their ecosystems or biomes, where the rainfall is less and the temperature is also less, cold deserts, and the region where we find the rainfall is more and the temperature is less, we refer that as temperate deciduous. So here you'll have temperate deciduous. Now what will be the region here? The region in between temperate deciduous and cold deserts, where the rainfall is less and temperature is also more. So this is called as the temperate grasslands. Right? And then when we talk about this area where the rainfall is comparatively less and temperature is also less, this is coniferous or taiga or boreal forest. And the last region where the rainfall is very less and the temperature is also very less, so we refer this as tundra. So this is how all the biomes can be expressed on the basis of precipitation and on the basis of temperature. So if you read this, if you practice this, then it becomes easy for you to remember them rather than by hearting, right? So this is some rough idea about your stats. So apologies that I took 5 minutes more. So tomorrow we'll continue from where we have left, right? So please revise this image so that it becomes easy for you to remember. Thank you, and we'll meet up tomorrow. Take care. Bye. अच्छा, हमको यहाँ पे स्टॉप करना है। अच्छा।